Okay, welcome back. I might have to split this video into two parts. It looks like it's going to get kind of long. Um, it just got so hot and stuffy and muggy in here, I had to open everything up and let some air in. Such as it is, if you can see the haze out there from the wildfires, we've got smoke in the air. I'll do another video about that because it's interesting how the National Weather Service and the Minnesota Pollution Control Department, they place all these warnings out there about how this can adversely affect all these people, and they list them out, you know, children, the elderly, da 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 da, but they completely omit the homeless. 4 million Americans. Once again, the government refuses to even publicly acknowledge that the homeless exist, which is one reason why we are treated so poorly and we are hated so much. But that's a whole nother story. I had to just get some air here and kind of regather my thoughts to focus on this. So I made a little outline to get us to where we want to go, which is to answer this question: what were the Nephilim? Now, given everything I've talked about before, and I hope you're thinking about what I'm saying, thinking carefully about it, what I've basically said so far is that the idea of physical giants isn't very consistent with the reality of our world. It doesn't fit in with the physics or the biology. It's possible to have really tall people, but they are, you know, what we, before political correctness, we would have called freaks. They are people you would have brought into a circus. Okay, and it's a shame, I'm not saying it's right at all to take any human being, they're made in the image of God, and to put them on public display like that. As a homeless person, I'm constantly being stared at like a zoo animal on display. But you don't feed the animals. And it's a horrible shame what we do, but this is how really, really tall people would be considered. Now, but the idea of like just gargantuan giant people who are so agile and great in war that they can go out and just kill everybody, it doesn't fit in with the laws of nature. And it's too much of a stretch to say, well, back then the laws of nature were different. Okay, maybe something was different. You know, there's a lot of speculation that it never rained until the flood, that there was this mist in the air that watered everything and provided drinking water and everything. Maybe. I don't think the Bible comes out and says that by any stretch to speak of, but I could be wrong. In fact, I think there might have been one verse that does kind of imply that. But again, let us reason together. I mean, the Bible doesn't come out and say everything. It tells the history and the genealogies very clearly, but when it comes to other things, God wants you to fight for it. He wants you to work for it to get that knowledge, not just sit back and, you know, in debauchery in this world, sit there in Sodom and Gomorrah, and God just comes down and says, here, let me just share my truth with you. No, you get the truth if you want to fight for it, if you want to go out and find it, and that's what we're doing here. So to finally answer this question of what at least I believe the Nephilim were and are, because remember it says there were giants in the earth in those, or there were Nephilim on the earth in those days and after. After could mean a few years after the flood, it could mean today. The Bible doesn't say, does it? But another thing the Bible does say when you get into end times prophecy, which is much of the Bible, talking about the very last days before the return of Jesus Christ, which seems to be right about now. There's this convergence of all these different prophecies that did not converge in the 1400s or the 1600s. It didn't coincide with the birth of the United States of America. It didn't happen during World War II. The convergence is happening in this era, in this generation. And that's why many people believe that this is the generation that is going to see the end of all things. Well, the Bible clearly says, I mean, let me find it. Okay, so in the book of Luke, chapter 17, verse 26, Jesus is talking about the end times. The disciples had asked him, what are going to be the signs of your coming? Remember Matthew 24? The Olivet Discourse? Well, one of his answers was in verse 26, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when I return. In the book of Timothy, chapter 3, starting in verse 1, the Apostle Paul says, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent," lack self-control, "fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God." That's what the Apostle Paul says is going to come before Jesus' return in the last days. Well, Jesus just said that it will be as in the days of Noah in the last days. Remember that transitive property? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Well, if Jesus says that before his return it will be as in the days of Noah, and then Paul explains what those days will be like, therefore what those days are like is what the days of Noah were like. In other words, in the days of Noah, it was perilous times, and men should be lovers of their own selves. They were covetous, they were boasters, they were proud, they were blasphemers, they were disobedient to parents, they were unthankful, ungrateful. For example, you live in the most safe and prosperous nation in the world, and all you can do is complain about the oppression that you're suffering as you get your PhD and serve in public office. Unholy, without natural affection, men not liking women, women not liking men, parents not really caring about their kids, kids not caring about their parents, truce breakers, false accusers, lacking self-control, fierce, Antifa, despisers of those that are good, passing laws against anyone who stands up against abortion to protect children, traitors. All these things. Lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. People are just living lives of entertaining themselves. That's what Paul says the days of Noah were like. Does that sound like today? Does it sound like 100 years ago? No, sounds like today. Now, in the book of Luke, chapter 17, verse 28, Jesus also says, "Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot." Remember, Sodom and Gomorrah. The flood is when the world was destroyed. In the days of Lot, that's when Sodom and Gomorrah and a couple other cities were destroyed. And he goes on to say, "They ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed." So in both cases you have the good and the righteous people they literally escape. God provides an escape for them. With Noah, he did it through the ark so that those 8 people could survive. God provided an escape for the righteous. In the days of Noah, it was Noah and his family. They were in the ark and they escaped the flood and the destruction of the world. In the days of Lot, it was when Lot finally left Sodom. The angels who came to destroy Sodom said to Lot, "We can't do this while you're here. You've got to leave, because we are here to rescue you, and then we're going to destroy Sodom. We're going to punish. We're going to judge Sodom." So always the good and the righteous are not subject to God's wrath. We are viewed as clean through the blood of Jesus, not because of what we do, but because of what he did for us and our acceptance of that. But everyone else, the people who reject God and they refuse, talk to the hand, "God, you created me, you're more powerful than me by a factor of infinity, but I have a really big head, so don't talk to me about it, God." And judgment comes to those people. Judgment day comes when they and their spirit stand before God and they try to explain why they did this to God. Those are the days of Noah. It sounds a lot like today, but there's something missing, isn't there? It doesn't mention anything about giants. It doesn't mention anything about big, huge, tall warrior, boom, 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 titans walking around. And hey, what do you know? As all these things converge on today, the year 2020, 2021, this whole region of time, there's no giants out there, are there? But there are some really big, tall people. The National Basketball Association is full of them. There are people who are really tall. I mean, forgive me for using this term, but freakishly tall. But there aren't giants walking around this earth. Now, what these people do when they grab hold of this giants idea and they won't let it go, they just won't let it go, they try to come up with ideas that are not biblical. So they start looking to transhumanism. They start looking to technology, DNA manipulation. They start looking for all these things. And this is one of the problems I had with prophecy watchers in my last video, where you get people like Billy Crone who come in there and all they can talk about is, oh, technology is going to change our DNA and that's where the giants are finally going to come in. It's like, really? You're the same people who say the rapture could happen any day. The rapture could happen, which is our escape. Just like Lot escaped, just like Noah escaped, the rapture is the church's escape before the judgment, the wrath of God on this world. Well, they're saying it could come any day, and in fact, people like Tom Horn with his Apophis asteroid thing, if that's the case, then the rapture has to come before that. So he's literally claiming that the rapture should happen within the next 8 years, which I think is possible. But if that's the case, then why are you're telling me that somehow between now and then they're going to suddenly DNA genetically create monstrous adult, within 8 years, adult giants in such quantities and numbers that you could call the earth being filled with giants? Folks, this doesn't make any sense. There's nothing practical in the Bible that's talking about a world filled with giants. Yes, there might be very tall people, unnaturally tall people. But just like Goliath, they're such a lumbering, they're big. If you come up and you don't have guns and you have to go up to that creature, that thing can wipe you out easily with a long sword before you even get within 6 feet of them. But if you're in a battlefield and you have to run around and try to attack each other, he can barely move. So you got to use a slingshot, and he's just standing there, and you hit him in the head. You see? There's no talk about giants to speak of. A lot of this comes from our imagination and what we want to believe, and the influence of Hollywood is supreme here. I can't emphasize that enough. People before our generation didn't have the Hollywood mindset. They didn't picture things in terms of what you see in Hollywood movies like we do. And you've got to cleanse yourself of that. I think that's one reason why God wants us to remain holy and to separate ourselves from that. Because if you keep filling your heads with these things, you start to think they're normal. Now, along those lines, look at what Jesus said when he talks about how it will be when he says, in the days of Noah, people basically were going about business as usual. They bought, they sold, they drank, they ate. They married wives, and then it also says, and they were given in marriage. Interesting. Why would you say that twice in two different ways? They married wives, and they were given in marriage. Now, you could look at it as, well, okay, well, the wife is being given by her father in marriage. Perhaps. But remember that part about not having natural affection, such as a man for a woman for a man? Sounds like you could conceivably say that's talking about homosexuality. Unnatural affection. Sexual relations do not lead to procreation, which is the whole point of sexual relations. I mean, yeah, it's fun, feels good, that's a blessing from God. But the purpose of it was to be fruitful and multiply. This is about God. Let me tell you one other thing that the Bible says. Matthew 22:30, Jesus said, "For in the because the I think it was the Pharisees or the Sadducees, they came up and they're always trying to trick Jesus, always trying to trick him." Just like today, people, when I talk about some of the topics I talk about, someone who doesn't like what I'm saying, they'll come up, and instead of debating the points from a factual standpoint, they'll come up and they'll ask questions that try to make you look bad just because they asked the question, not because of anything you did. It's just a bunch of silly juvenile manipulation. Well, Paul, are you saying that smoking doesn't cause cancer? That's their argument. You call that try going into a debate team or a courtroom with that ridiculous argument. It's lunacy. But just asking the question, the implication is that Paul is saying smoking doesn't cause cancer. And I didn't say that. What I've said is that the science out there that claims that it causes cancer doesn't prove anything. It's junk science. Smoking may cause cancer. I don't think it does, because after all that research, you would have had legitimate science that proves it causes cancer. But they don't have it. They don't have it after all those decades and decades and money spent on these studies. Okay? It's the same thing here, though. If how do I put this? They were trying to trick Jesus by asking questions that just asking the question seems to answer the question. It seems to discredit the person. But Jesus foiled them every single time, as you would expect. So what they did was they asked him, well, what if, and they always do this, let's go to these hypotheticals. Well, what if a man marries and he dies, so the woman marries his brother, and then he dies, and then she marries the next brother. When they get to heaven, whose husband is she going to be? And they're trying to trick him. Because it's an impossible question to answer, right? I mean, in other words, whose wife are you? If you're only supposed to have one wife, if you're supposed to marry one time for life, and you are a partner, because you're an image of the relationship between God and Israel, Jesus and the church. That's what marriage is supposed to be. That's the point of it. Then, when we get to heaven, whose husband is she going to be? She was with all three. Well, Jesus foiled him. He came back and his answer was this. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. What that means is that the angels of God in heaven do not marry. They don't marry. You see, the relationship between a man and his wife in this world is supposed to be representative of an image of God's relationship to Israel, Jesus' relationship to the church. That's the point of it. That's why God wanted you to marry. He wanted you to think in everything you do in this world, to think in terms of Him. And that's why you're supposed to have just one. You don't go out and have a second wife or husband. That's idolatry. That's adultery, cheating on your spouse. That's the equivalent of idolatry with God. So Jesus here clearly says the angels in heaven do not marry. And yet, when we go back to Genesis, this thing where they're talking about the giants, remember? They're saying all these people who grab hold of this giants thing and won't let go. They say, well, the angels came down and they, what did it say here? There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. Well, if the angels don't marry, and the purpose of marriage, one of the purposes, is for procreation, angels don't reproduce. Why would they be able to reproduce with... See, angels are created by God. They're much more powerful than us, humans, for now. We will one day be more powerful than the angels, but in heaven. But right now, they are created beings. They're not super... Again, get this Hollywood thing out of your head. Angels are what they are. And one thing they don't do, and were never meant to do, was to procreate. They don't marry. That's not their role. So right there, that tells you that these sons of God that it talks about in Genesis were not the angels. Unless you're saying Jesus was a liar, because he said the angels do not marry. So his answer to that question about whose wife, which of the brothers' wife will she be in heaven, the answer was there is no marriage in heaven. There's no concept of marriage in heaven. It isn't needed anymore. That was something for this world. As much as you love that person, as much as you experience together, that was a beautiful, wonderful gift I gave you in that world. But in heaven, it's about God. It's not about anything else but God. You and God. And that's what's going to make it so beautiful. Because God is that beautiful. Well, if these were not angels who came down and basically raped women or married women and created these offspring that were giants, then what's going on here, folks? What is going on here? Well, consider this. In the days of Noah, now according to the Bible, if you look at the genealogies, remember, people from Adam through Noah, they lived a long time. They lived 7, 8, 900 years. And again, the scoffers today will look at that and just say, oh, that's ludicrous, that's impossible. It's like, well, it isn't. It isn't. When you look at DNA, even in the last 50 years, the studies of DNA have shown each generation of humans, the DNA degrades to such a point that it isn't all that much longer than now before our DNA is going to degrade to the point where the species is no longer sustainable. And the species will just go extinct on its own because it's just got too much crap in its DNA. Every every generation introduces new mutations. And if you project that backwards, that's yet another evidence, if not proof, that humans have not been around for millions of years. Because if you extrapolate that backwards, you can't do it. You don't get back to perfect DNA. And why would it start out with perfect DNA anyway? That doesn't make any sense according to evolution, where everything's just random. Only if you're created perfect and then there's a fall. But if people are living 7, 8, 900 years because they have much better, more closer to original DNA back in the first generations after Adam and Eve, well, for one thing, they can live that long, and they're also going to be, they're not going to suffer from all of the problems that we have today. So they're generally going to be smarter, healthier, probably just better in every way. You know, they're not going to be people who spend their entire lives staring at a cell phone, watching TV, and smoking pot. That's probably not what they're going to be. What do you do with 900 years? Well, you're probably going to go out and master certain things. You're going to master arts. You're going to study the world you live in to understand God better. You're going to learn skills. You're going to invent. So I don't think the technology back then was like we have today, but I think in terms of what you might call Stone Age and Bronze Age and all that, I think the technology was very good. I mean, the proof is pyramids and all these things that these ancient alien people keep pointing out and saying, well, that's impossible. They couldn't have built that back then. It's like, well, they could have. They could have. If you got 900 years, if you have everybody in the world lives for 7, 8, 900 years, at least until the flood puts an end to that, where people start living much shorter lives. Up until then, and they're out there reproducing and reproducing and reproducing, you got a couple consequences. For one thing, the knowledge of the world and the technology is going to skyrocket, isn't it? But also, so is the population. And if you do the math on that, I mean, there's no way to know. The Bible doesn't give enough information, but the possibility exists easily. I mean, easily. You don't even have to stretch anything. That the population of the world at the time of the flood was the same as the population we have today, about 8 billion people. Easily. It could have been twice that amount. Easily. Imagine 8 to 16 billion people who live to be 7, 8, 900 years old. When you're building science and technology, you're building on the shoulders of giants. Well, what if giants, there's the word giants, which will come up in a moment. What if you're doing the work of a Kepler and a Copernicus and an Isaac Newton and an Einstein? Because you live from the year 1, well, no, okay, you live from the year 1400 all the way up to today. So you accomplished what? Copernicus, Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton, Leibniz, Maxwell, Einstein. You alone accomplished what all they did because you were a brilliant person. And you've got 16 billion other people who live that long who are also accomplishing that much. You see, think again, let us reason together. What would happen if you lived to be 7, 8, 900 years old? What's going to happen is you're going to lean toward extremes. because time is just going on and on and on. It doesn't mean that you don't enjoy your life because you're healthy. You're not just getting old that quickly and unable to function. So you're going to lean toward extremes. If you love life and you love God and you love the world and you love investigating the world, you're going to go in that direction and you're just going to eat it up and just savor it. And you're going to create advancements so quickly throughout your lifetime that it would take hundreds of people today to accomplish. You don't need to build on the shoulders of giants because you are one of the giants themselves, and you live long enough to build on your own work. Imagine if Einstein could have kept going on for 700 years. How much could he have figured out? Because everything we know of him, he figured out when he was about 23 years old. Think about it, folks. Okay, but what if you're kind of an unhappy, miserable person? Like these, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, all these people who just, the world's just a dark cloud, everything's so bad, this is the worst time we've ever lived in, and humans are bad and rotten, and we need to pass laws, and we need to do this. I mean, if that's just your existence, can you imagine 700, 800, 900 years of that? You're going to lean toward an extreme of depression and just bitterness and hatred and, frankly, toward violence and you're just going to lean toward evil. Over 700, 800, 900 years, you're just going to go off in a direction that is just so, you're just going to be like, I just want to die. I can't stand this world. Everyone's oppressing me. We got to change everything. It's my responsibility to change those 8 billion people's behavior, even if I have to do it at gunpoint through laws. Even if what I'm doing is monumentally stupid. Can you imagine the stupidity we've seen in the last few years with these loony liberals, this political correctness, this idiocy about little boys being little girls, and 2 + 2 = 5, and just all the stupidity. Can you imagine if those people were allowed to go on for 1,000 years doing that? You see, it's like I said in one of my last videos where I talked about what's going on today, I think, is a separation of the wheat and the chaff. All right, the atheists, the people who don't believe in God and they hate God, they're gone already. They're gone. They're on their way to hell. It's game over. Those who remain, you've got Christians, you've got people who are on the fence, people of other religions who have an open mind, but they may not have heard the gospel or understand it. There's a separation going on with them as well. And the fake church, all these money preachers, the Benny Hinn's and all that nonsense, the Kenneth Copelands and Joel Osteens, these people they're starting to head off toward hell as well. Because they're not real. And you just whatever remains keeps getting split and split. And that little remnant that remains, that's what's going to be taken away in the rapture. Well, it's the same thing over 1,000 years where people live to be 1,000 years old. There's this divergence. You head off in a life path and you start to diverge more and more and more over time. And you've got good and righteous people and you've got evil debauchery. Now, I don't want to get outside the Bible too much, but I would mention that Josephus, the great Jewish historian for the Romans, he, in Antiquities of the Jews, he talks about the traditions, at least. Of course, there's no written record. The flood kind of, put a divider in history. But the traditions, presumably passed down from Noah and his family, was that after Cain killed Abel was the righteous son of Adam and Eve. Cain was the not so righteous, shall we say. When Cain killed Abel, the righteous one was gone. Cain was punished, but the tradition, according to Josephus, was that Cain went off on that path. He was banned, he was exiled from the Garden of Eden. He went off on the path of evil. And you could argue that the people who are of that type, even today, are more or less descended from him. Then Seth was born, and Seth was a good and righteous son. And he kind of did what Abel would have done. There was a divergence right from the beginning. Good and evil. Well, the evil ones are nasty. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they do busyness, they exploit, they enslave, they go to war, they fight, they're violent. That's what these people do. The good and the righteous people don't. They live good, happy lives. They're satisfied. They have fun with their lives. They're not out there whining and moaning, complaining, carrying signs, oh, we're being oppressed, and women are oppressed and everything's oppression and white privilege and male domination and blah, blah, blah. And they're not doing that. They're just living good, happy lives and enjoying their 1,000 years or however long they live. These other people are out there everything's just bad, horrible, we got to go to war, we got to fight, we got to carry signs. And you can see how this divergence creates a really horrible, hellish world, or a really nice, good, pleasant world under the circumstances, given that even those people were fallen. Well, which group is going to go and annihilate the other one? Do you think the good and righteous people, unless they're ordered by God, do you think they're just going to go out and kill all the bad people? No, it's the bad people who are going to go and try to kill them and steal their stuff. So over 1,000 years, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. Most likely, this group that descended from Cain, or at least spiritually, these people who went off toward debauchery and toward the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter, the violence, the terrorism, that kind of thing, they'd probably just wipe these people out. And what was left? Exactly what's described here. These people who were all about themselves. They had nothing to do with God. They were traitors. They were diabolical. They were just greedy. They were just bad and evil. All the thoughts of their mind were evil continuously. As I go around Minnesota, everything I see is evil. When I'm driving down the road, every single car behind me is coming up on me. I just see those headlights getting closer and closer while I drive the speed limit. Every thought on their mind is evil. Even obeying the speed limit, obeying the law, even that they can't do. As I go out there and try to talk to people, they're suspicious, they're nasty, they're mean, and yet they pretend to be really nice. Everything in their lives is just continuously evil. And that was the days of Noah. Well, after the days of Noah, when you had Noah's family starting the human species all over again, you're going to get that same divergence, right? And that brings us to today, where you have what seems to be good people and evil people, and people who ride the fence in the middle. And what we're seeing in the last several decades is this separation of them. People are being forced to choose sides. Am I bat guano crazy, and I'm going to go off in this political correctness? The world's this deep, dark, we're under a dark cloud, everything's bad. Are you going to go off in that direction? Or, I'm a big businessman, billionaire, and therefore I get to call the shots for 8 billion people. Because I say so, because I'm rich, even though I'm just one of them, and I'm not any better than them. Those people are headed off toward hell. They're headed off where they should be. The good and the just and the righteous people, the people who want to be good and want to live in a happy world and have a good family life and love their children and have their children love and respect them. These bad people are passing laws that are making it impossible for them to do that anymore. It's the same thing you had in the days of Noah. And God said, I repent that I created man. I have to destroy them. I'm required by my justice to pour my wrath on these people. And in the end times, at the end of days, before Jesus returns, the wrath of God on this world is going to be worse than it was in the flood. The Bible says it will be worse than it's ever been in the world before or ever will be again. The very worst experience of human beings is likely to happen in our generation, as the wrath of God is poured out upon the people who live in this world even today, once the church is raptured out of here. The escape, the same thing that happened to Lot, the same thing that happened to Noah, the same thing that happened to Enoch. Remember Enoch? Enoch was raptured away as well. God always takes out his righteous before he throws his wrath on the bad and evil people. And the separation of the wheat and chaff is what defines who that remaining remnant group is who deserves to be escaped. Alright, so today you have this convergence again of all these prophecies. The birth of Israel, Daniel, the book of Daniel here. Let me find this. Daniel was given so much. He was given so much knowledge about the future. He's one of the few prophets in the Bible who there's not a single bad thing said about him. He was just as righteous as you can get in a fallen world when you're a fallen person. He was just loved by the Lord. And it says in Daniel 12, verse 4, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." So all these prophecies that Daniel put in his Bible that was revealed to him, these were prophecies about the end times, the end of the age before Jesus returns. God told him to shut up the words and seal the book, as if you were, like a scroll, official document. You put that wax seal on there, and you don't break the seal until it's time. You remember in Revelation, the 7 seals on the scroll are broken. What God was saying was, Daniel, the book that you're writing isn't meant to be understood by your generation. It will be understood by a future generation. It will be sealed until then. And that's why today in this generation, for the first time, the things that Daniel said in there make sense. We can understand them. No previous generation could do that because it's being unsealed. Yet part of that convergence that we're in the end times. Many shall run to and fro. Well, however you interpret that, it describes this world. We have airplanes. People can go to and fro. They couldn't do it before. Knowledge shall be increased. What generation of human history has had more of a knowledge increase than the last couple generations, the last 150, 200 years? Knowledge has just taken off at a frightening pace because people don't know what to do with it and they use it irresponsibly. So all these things are converging, and there's others in the Bible. There's the book of Ezekiel, Isaiah. There's a lot of other prophecies that support this. So if you're looking for giants today because it's as it was in the days of Noah, you're not going to find giants. So your only options are either to reevaluate your understanding of the situation or to grasp and just hunt and try to shoehorn some idea in there that'll explain it. Like, oh, science is going to create giants and it's going to do it really quick. We're going to have adult giants all over the world within 8 years. Because, it doesn't make any sense, folks. There aren't giants. Clearly, giants were not a part of the problem, like in terms of big people. That wasn't a part of the problem, at least as far as I can tell, in the days of Noah. The angels can't marry. They can't reproduce, so they didn't come down and do this. It was men doing this. Probably the ones who were following Cain, descendants of Cain. In other words, the bad people, the evil people, the people who turned everything in this world into misery and suffering. Dark cloud, everything's bad, we're going to make it worse ourselves. They married wives, whoever they chose. Remember, these people are bad and evil. The good people are going to do what God said. One man will marry one woman. These people over here, they're going to have a harem. They're going to go out without getting married and have orgies all over the place. They're going to see the wives and take them. And they're going to reproduce in faster, greater numbers with more destruction to their DNA, diseases. They're just debauchery, degenerates. And that's what we have today. Okay? So the question is then, what are the Nephilim? What are the Nephilim? This thing that was translated as the word giants, but it really shouldn't have been translated at all because it was a word that God created in His Word, like my word, authoritative-sounding. You know what authoritative-sounding is, partly because I tell you, but you can figure it out from the context. Just as you would figure out what the word racism means from the context if you heard that often enough. Well, the Nephilim clearly represent everything I've been talking about. These people who are bad. And yet, people who are just living their ordinary lives. They're buying, they're selling, they're marrying, giving in marriage. They're just going about their daily business. See, that's the problem. They think what they're doing is normal. They don't see a problem. They might see a problem in this world, like, Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all this. All these liberal groups that are out there just trying to change this, that, and the other thing. Because they can't accept reality for what it is. They think that's normal. But normal is what these people did. The people who followed, Seth. Pursuing God. The creator of the universe, the one you will, hopefully, if you choose to, spend eternity with, when this world is nothing but a memory. But if you're going to make this world the center of your existence, and you think this world is so important that you have to do all these things, I have to become a billionaire, I have to build my own personal space program, I have to dictate the terms of existence for everyone else. If that's your existence, you have nothing to do with God. You're an abomination to God, and you will be judged. But yet you're going about your life as if what you're doing is perfectly normal. It doesn't even occur to you that you're living a pointless existence that's going to amount to precisely zero and then head far into the negatives as you go off to hell to enjoy your father, eternity with your father, the devil. That's where you chose to go. Well, let's go back to that Genesis, because I think the answer to what the Nephilim were and are was there all along. It's just people didn't want to see it. They wanted to look for something bigger. They wanted to look for something Hollywood style. And I'm so sorry, but I got a noise, but I gotta let some air in here. It is so hot and stuffy and muggy. It's pushing 90 degrees. Alright, let's try this again then. There were Nephilim in the earth in those days, and also after that. When the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Of that sentence, which word has the most meaning, the most significance, the most meaning that you can use to interpret what's going on here? Which word is it? The? Same? Became? Mighty? Men? Which? Were? Of? Old? Men? Of again? Or renown? Which words have the most meaning? Which words are the reason that sentence exists? Is it because of the word of? Is it because of the word the? There's two words in that sentence that give that sentence any meaning at all. The word mighty and the word renown. What does mighty mean? Mighty in battle means that you're a big, strong warrior and you can go out and kill everybody. But mighty can also mean you're a complete glasses-wearing acne freak, an adult child who has got billions and billions of dollars, and you go off and you start telling the world, I am going to dictate the terms of your existence in this terms or that terms. I am going to be the one who mandates and who has my army that I control through governments put a gun to your head and tell you to stick a needle in your arm when you don't have any idea what's in that needle, and it could be something really, really, really bad for you. What if you're mighty enough, you have billions of dollars because, I don't know, you created some online payment service, and you say, I am going to go to Mars, and I am going to take 1 million human beings with me, and I am going to be the emperor over there, because I'm special, because, well, there is no reason, actually. He's just one person out of 8 billion people, just like anyone else. But for some reason, he seems to think he's better than everyone else. Maybe it's because of those billions of dollars he has. In a world that worships money as an idol, that makes sense. In this world that follows Seth, that looks for God, money doesn't mean anything. You can have as much money as you want, and you are still equal to the person who's living there in the gutter. Because you're both made in the image of God, and you should be treated equally. That's why these people try to help the poor and the homeless. But you get a billionaire like that who's over from this evil segment of society. He doesn't spend his billions of dollars trying to help people who need help in the here and now, right now. He's going to build some mechanism for the future where humanity will be saved in the future. Of course, it'll never actually happen, but he'll be dead by then, so nobody can point that out to him. But he's going to do what he wants to do to serve himself because it's all about him. That's what the word mighty can also mean. Not just a warrior in battle. But what about this word renown? The Bible interprets itself, folks. This sentence where it talks about the Nephilim tells you what the Nephilim were. Mighty men of old. What does that mean? Men of old. In other words, of the past. We remember them. Do you personally remember Vladimir Johnson? Vladimir Johnson. Do you remember Vladimir Johnson? He lived in what is now called the nation of Georgia back in the year 1610. He was a cobbler. He lived to be 29 years old, and he died of a disease. He had no children. Do you know of him? He's just one of the people who's ever lived. And I just made it up, obviously. I don't know who that's my point. You don't know who that person is. I don't know who all these billions of people were who were living over, or hundreds of millions who lived over the last 2,000 years. But you don't know them either. But you do know Isaac Newton. You do know Copernicus. You do know Mozart. You do know Napoleon. You see, there's some individuals who stand above the crowd. Those are men of old. Men who you remember, even though they didn't exist in your time. They still have no relevance to you directly, but you know of them anyway. Renown, what does that mean? It means you're known. It means famous. And famous, you got to understand, famous is not a concept that is known to this world until the last couple hundred years ago. There were always people who you've heard of. I mean, if you live in Egypt, you're going to know about Pharaoh, and you probably know about a couple of the past pharaohs. But just like Americans don't know a whole lot about James Polk, one of their presidents, or Benjamin Harrison, you know, to an extent they know something about Richard Nixon or Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton. But you don't know everything about all of them. Well, it's the same with the Egyptians. There might have been a pharaoh like Ramses who did something extraordinary, and he was known. He was a man of renown. He was famous. Many of the other pharaohs were just, nobody heard of them. Probably no one heard of King Tut, King Tutankhamun, until we rediscovered his treasures. Okay, so throughout history, if you're living in Egypt, how are you going to know about a, quote, hero or a renowned person in China? How are you going to know? What about the engineer behind the Great Wall of China? That's quite an accomplishment back then. But who in Europe had even heard of this person? Was this person known like Frank Lloyd Wright? No, they didn't know who they were. You see, the concept of fame and celebrity didn't really exist. They had occasional people. You had mythological people even, like Achilles, Beowulf, you know, these literature characters. And you had bona fide people who were elevated, like the various Caesars, Julius Caesar, Hannibal, Alexander the Great. You had individuals who rose to such a position of influence that people even throughout a region, or you know, the known world of the time, Europe and the Middle East and Africa, had heard of them. They were people of renown, but there were very, very few of them, and the concept of fame and celebrity didn't exist. But what did you get when you got broadcast media? Not just broadcast media, but that includes the printing press. I've said it before. I said it in my first video on this topic, two videos again. Who was the witness that God chose to tell the world what the conditions were in Israel before he brought the Jews back to Israel? The celebrity he chose to tell the world, to testify that this is a barren wasteland. Nothing can live here. It's dead. So that everyone will know when the Jews come back and create the sixth most powerful nation in the world in basically one generation, that they'll understand it was the hand of God that did that. It was not the Jews that did that. Who was that person? The witness was named Mark Twain. Mark Twain was probably the first what you might call real celebrity. He deserved it because he was a very good writer, very humorous, very clever person, and he was a cultural commentator unparalleled. Now, there were other heroes. Obviously, the American Revolution, George Washington was a hero. Thomas Paine, as a writer, was a hero. There were a lot of heroes and things, and there had always been individuals, again, a few individuals here and there, but they did something specific. They earned their celebrity. They earned their fame, as did Mark Twain. But as we got broadcast media, what did you get? First you got Hollywood. Well, first you had radio, but concurrent with that was radio and Hollywood. And you had these personalities. And people would tune into the radio, or they would go to the cinema, and they would see these people over and over again. They would see Humphrey Bogart. They would hear Perry Como on the radio. They never met Perry Como. They never met Humphrey Bogart. They never will meet them. These people live 1,500 miles away on the other side of the country. And as they gain celebrity and wealth, they're more isolated from the average person than they ever have been before. You're not going to meet them. And yet you know their name. You don't know the name of, what was it, Vladimir Johnson? You don't know him. He was a nobody. Just like you. Just like me. But you knew Humphrey Bogart. You knew Humphrey Bogart. You see, these celebrities, and what happened was, originally when that was first starting, the people had to actually have something to recommend them to get that celebrity status. In other words, they had to have some kind of talent. That's why you had such great actors and great films in early Hollywood. Great screenwriting. Very clever filmmakers. These really were people who had talent and skill. But as they built up the industry, it got taken over by people who were more good at marketing. They didn't have any skill. And what do you have today? The same thing in the music industry. The first ones you hear of are the great ones. I mean, the Chuck Berrys and all this. These were incredibly good entertainers and musicians. The Beatles and all those groups in the 60s and 70s. And what happened once the industry got built up by these people who had real skill, you suddenly get all of these mechanized, auto-tuned, fake pop stars. They just pull someone out of a high school, put her in a tight dress, put all this makeup on her, and put her on stage. And by broadcasting her picture everywhere, stupid people will start to idolize that girl. Even when she makes a mistake and she gets out of sync with the lip sync because she can't sing for crap. And they have to use auto-tune to even try to fix it. But she looks good. See, this girl or guy, the boy bands or whatever, they don't have a lot of talent. And yet they're elevated to this status. And today what you've got is this glut of celebrities and famous people all around the world. There's magazines and cable TV channels devoted to it. There's internet sites devoted to following what this celebrity's doing. They're out there with a camera while they go into the store to see what they're buying. They're outside their houses with telephoto lenses trying to capture a picture of them through the window. Why? These people don't mean anything. They have nothing to do with you. They will never hang out with you. You will never meet them, or you might meet them at a book signing or something. But their bodyguards will make sure you don't get very close to them. You will never interact with this person like you would interact with a normal human being. This is something new over the last 100 years or so. It's called celebrities. All right? The same became mighty men which were old. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown, men of fame, men of celebrity. In other words, ordinary, average people being elevated to the status of idol. We have shows called American Idol. What happens when you do that? What are you doing? You're taking human beings who were created by God in the image of God, all equal. Like our, Declaration of Independence says, all men are created equal. Well, but like Animal Farm says, some animals are more equal than others. When you start taking all these people who are just ordinary average and you start elevating them so that you're putting a poster of them on your wall instead of putting a Bible on your desk, you're no longer thinking about God. You're thinking about Christina Aguilera or Justin whatever Timberlake. You're thinking about these people. You're thinking about some rapper. These are people you will never meet. They have no relevance to you whatsoever, and many of them increasingly have no talent or skill to recommend them in the first place. They're completely manufactured by an entertainment industry. And yet they're on your mind all the time. You want to know what they're doing. You want to know who they're dating. You want to know what their house looks like. And every time you do that, that's a moment that you're not thinking about God. It's the age of fame and celebrity. And folks, I think that's exactly what this is saying here. In the age before Noah, what was happening, these people who had lived so long and accomplished so much in their lives, there were just, people were not looking at God anymore. They were looking at all these hundreds or thousands of celebrities, famous people that they knew, some of which might have sort of kind of earned it by actually having talent, and others were manufactured through industry and marketing. But the point is, they're just human beings. You'll never meet them. They're irrelevant. Why are you spending your life thinking about them? They don't matter. You're supposed to be building a relationship with God. That's why you're here. It's a distraction. These are men of renown. And folks, that's what we have today. As it was in the days of Noah. That's what it was like in the days of Noah. And that's what we have today. Celebrities, giants, mighty people, people who are elevated. Sorry about that, folks. The camera overheated again. Had to give it a break. So let's summarize this and bring this all together into one nice package. All right. As the world converges prophetically toward everything the Bible said would happen in the end times before the return of Jesus, before the rapture of the church, as this is clearly happening, are we seeing a world that is becoming populated with giants, with big giant people who are offspring of fallen angels who had sex with human women? We're not seeing it, folks. We're not seeing it. What we are seeing are giants of industry, giants of business, political giants, entertainment giants, literary giants, academic giants, scientific giants. That's what we're seeing. Men of renown, men of old. We remember Isaac Newton. He hasn't lived for, 400 years. We remember him. Einstein died 60 years ago. We remember him. Now, one thing I've left out until now, according to many people, the word Nephilim does have a translation. Now, I can't confirm the veracity of this. Again, I don't have my computer, but the translation that most people use for the word Nephilim is fallen ones. What does fallen mean in the context of humanity? Adam and Eve were made perfect, but they fell. How did they fall? They fell when they elevated themselves above their station. Here's God, holy, way above those who He created. Here's us. It's not that we're low or lowly. He created us magnificently. The Bible says we are fearfully and beautifully made, right? As modern science is proving. The human body is unbelievably complicated, extraordinary. You've got a holy God. Adam and Eve, they have a beautiful, wonderful life. Everything's beautiful. They're walking with God. But it wasn't enough. They had to have more. They had to elevate themselves. And who inspired them to do that? The serpent, the devil, Satan. Satan came over and said, "Did God really tell you not to eat this fruit?" You know, again, just by asking the question, planting seeds of doubt, not making an argument, just like people do with everything I'm saying. Well, Paul, are you saying that blah, 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 blah? Just by asking the question, they try to make the other person look bad. And that's what Satan did with Adam and Eve. They elevated themselves. They said, well, God is holy. He created us, and this is our station compared to Him, and everything's wonderful. He told us not to do just one thing. Don't eat of that tree. But we want to do it anyway. We're going to elevate ourselves. And when they did that, they fell. By trying to elevate yourself, you fall. This is what Satan did. Satan looked at the throne of God and he said, I want that job. I don't have any right to it. I don't have any power to justify it or to get it. I can't defeat the one who created me, as far less powerful than He is, but I want it anyway. By trying to elevate himself, Satan fell, and he will spend eternity in hell for it. What is a celebrity? A celebrity, and I don't mean someone like an Einstein who goes out and tries to do something that matters and the world elevates him necessarily. But what about these pop culture celebrities? These people who, from the time they're in school, they just want to be on the Maury Povich show or whatever is out there today. I want to be on the TV. They want this celebrity. They're craving it. And if they can get it by doing something that actually matters and shows some kind of skill, fine. If they can get it by just having a marketing team put them out in front of people so that stupid people put their posters on the wall, fine. Doesn't matter to them. They just want to be elevated. And by being elevated, by definition, you are falling. You've fallen from God. The Nephilim, fallen ones. Folks, I know this sounds contrary to what you've been told your whole life, and I'm not, again, being dogmatic. I am not an expert on the Bible or the ancient languages, but I am as sincere as you can get at knowing the truth, and that's what I pray to God for. And before making this video, I prayed to Him, let me say the right thing here. Let me say what needs to be said to glorify you. This isn't about me. I'm a homeless guy. I couldn't be glorified. Even the best marketing department in the world couldn't turn me into a celebrity. It doesn't matter. You've got to have humility in the face of a truly holy God. One who is elevated. Not elevated by marketing and manipulation, but one who just, their existence is elevated above everyone else. That's God. That's what holy means. Well, it sounds contrary to what you've been told, but I think Nephilim is talking about the concept of celebrity. It's talking about the concept of famous people. People who have nothing to do with you whatsoever. They might live 20,000 miles away. If Musk has his way, they might live on the planet Mars. And yet you know their name. You're putting their poster on the wall. You take time out of your limited, tiny little life to turn on an idiot box to watch them be interviewed on some ridiculous TV program. Those people matter to you for some reason. And what do you call that when you elevate someone to that position? It's called an idol. And what is one of the 10 commandments? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Idolatry is one of the quickest ways to hell. You're putting something before God. Instead of spending your day studying the Word of God and praying to God and getting to know God, who you will spend eternity with if you go that route, you're too busy worrying about Justin Bieber. Or Carl Sagan, if you're scientifically minded. I think the Nephilim are most certainly here today, just as they were in the days of Noah. It's just people have been misinformed and deceived about what the Nephilim are. They're out there looking for giants. They're out there looking for titans, something out of a Hollywood movie. And they're not seeing it, and they're getting scared because they're like, well, everything else is converging. The rapture looks like it's about to come, but we don't have any giants here, and I don't understand that. Well, maybe the Bible wasn't talking about giants the whole time anyway. Doesn't giants just sound kind of out of place? I'm not saying it's impossible. God can do anything, but you put all this stuff together, the laws of physics and biology, the history, what is actually said in the Word of God and other documents, what is going on in the world where you have all these claims of people finding large, huge bones, but nobody can actually prove it, just like Bigfoot. When you put all this stuff together, what you get, if you reason together instead of entering fantasy land, is that there are no giants. That's what you get. There might have been really tall people, but there are no giants. This isn't a world filled with giants, folks. How deluded do you have to be to think that that's happening or that it's going to happen in the next few years? The giants are these celebrities. They're the people who you, in your mind, have elevated above. In other words, you've made them holy. You have set them apart. Holy means to be set apart. You've taken Justin Bieber and made him more important than, not to focus on myself, but on me. I don't know if Justin Bieber even plays an instrument. He sings, and he sings better than me. I've lost my voice, and I never had that great a voice to begin with. But I can play instruments. I mean, All things being equal, you could argue I have as much talent as Justin Bieber. It's just a different talent. Yet I'm stuck living in a car where everyone leaves me to die. And this guy, everyone's paying attention to every move he makes. Now, I don't want people doing that with me. I'm not that important. But he does. He's elevating himself. He's trying to make himself holy. And that's how you fall. The fallen ones. The Nephilim. Now, that makes sense. That describes the world we live in today. And what do you know? If you look at it that way, it becomes one more brick in that wall of convergence, proving that we are in the end times. Very, very close to the rapture of the church, God returning to this earth to work directly with Israel, where this generation is going to see the hand of God at work like no generation has seen for thousands of years. They are going to go back and see, and they're not going to know what to do with it, because they're not used to seeing truly supernatural events. Like I've said all along, it's going to be a real difficult time for the people who are left behind after the rapture. Now, another thing I need to point out here is that, so sad, so sad. My last video here on this series was about that show, Prophecy Watchers, and some of the people who they interview. These people are elevating themselves to the status of, quote, experts and gurus on prophecy. And some of them go off into this la-la land of UFOs and elongated head people and ancient alien technology and all this, and they go off into this world of giants. And these are the people who are really purveying. They're the ones who are reinforcing, if you're a prophecy watcher, if you're someone who does watch prophecy, sincerely, and you're being fed this diet of there were giants in those days, there were giants in those days, there were giants in those days. They found some bones in 1858. It's in this little bit on page 17 of the newspaper. See, it proves everything. If that's what you're being fed every day, you're going to think you're being deceived. You're being led away from God, away from the truth. The problem is the people who are leading you there are claiming to be Christians. They're claiming to be Christian leaders. You see, I've had a problem all along with these Christian celebrities. When they have a prophecy conference and they have these people, they're almost brought in with bodyguards. Remember when I went to that prophecy conference here, Jan Markell's prophecy conference here, and they wouldn't let me in because all I wanted to do was go in and shake Amir Sarfati's hand and leave because I had to go to work. And they just, like at a rock music show, if I went to an AC/DC show or something, they would say, you don't have a backstage pass, get out of here, we're calling the cops. Well, there were cops all outside that building protecting those people. There's something special about them. They're elevated above others. They get police protection. I'm stuck sleeping in this car out there with all kinds of gangbangers and criminals and thugs messing with me while I'm sleeping all alone. But Amir Sarfati gets police protection. Do you see the problem here? And I'm not putting down Amir. I don't think he understands what has happened to him, but this is the warning I give to these people. All these people who are so obsessed with prophecy to the exclusion of everything else in the Bible, they're becoming Christian celebrities. They're becoming Christian rock stars. When one of these people enter the room, everyone stands up and starts applauding, and they pull out their cameras and they want to film Jack Hibbs. They want to film him. Why? I don't know. Where's that film going to go? It's going to burn with fire with the rest of the planet. I don't understand why they're filming Jack Hibbs. Why? Why are they doing this? And I understand the inclination toward doing that. Sorry, I got a noisemaker here. And he's just going to sit right next to me. When people start taking anybody and elevating them to this position of idol, there's a big problem. You are sinning against God. How much more so when you take a so-called Christian leader and you elevate them? There might be people out there who have pictures of our Amir Sarfati or Jack Hibbs or Tom Horn or someone like that on their walls because they're heroes. Heroes, men of renown. Where's the humility in this? Where is the humility that comes with being a child of a holy God, the one and only who is set apart? That's what holy means. Where is the humility in that? When you're trying to reach up for the sky, you're trying to reach up, or you're taking someone else and trying to push them up and elevate them. And that's it, folks. I think the Nephilim are celebrities. I think it describes the concept of fame and renown, the concept of elevating human beings to the level of an idol en masse, like in such numbers that you can't even keep track of how many celebrities there are. Not just this Pharaoh and Alexander the Great and these people who actually did something so you remember them. I'm talking about Joe Putz being pulled out of a high school by a marketing department and being turned into someone who 5 years later has $100 million and a mansion on every continent of the world when they don't even have any talent. Or a news reporter, this Anderson Cooper. Okay, a building falls down and kills a whole bunch of people while they're sleeping inside their own homes. But instead of just sending a reporter to report the facts, they have to send the celebrity reporter because it's all about him. He doesn't do any better job. I would argue he does a worse job than many of the other reporters. But you've got to have the celebrity there. It's all about Anderson Cooper, not about those people who died in that building. And if any of these media people in Minnesota ever finally did want to report my story to you, you can bet the reason in their mind that they would do it is to elevate themselves, to further their career, to make their name a little bit more known in households. It ain't to help me. There's no humility at all. And hey, what did Paul say it was going to be like in the end times? People would be high-minded, heady, boasters, proud, all about themselves. You might say the big buzzword today is narcissistic. So to have this happen with Christians is really disturbing, folks. It's part of the apostasy of the church. I hope you understand, I am not trying to single out people. I'm not trying to single out Tom Horn or Amir Sarfati or Jack Hibbs or anyone. I'm not trying to pin them out and say, oh, this person's a paid agent and spy for Satan. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that take heed that no man deceive you. We can't be deceived by them, and they are responsible for making sure that they are not deceived and that they don't deceive themselves. But as they get a big head, as they build this celebrity status, that's what happens naturally. Another reason I don't ever want to be a celebrity. I don't want to have to fight that battle to try to retain my humility when the whole world around me is trying to raise me up above the masses. I don't want that. I'm not strong enough to fight that battle. I could end up getting a big head myself, and I don't want it. And this is why the church, as originally created, was meant to be small groups meeting in homes. It wasn't meant to be a megachurch, where you can put someone on the stage where everyone else is looking at them and thinking about them and hearing their words instead of being in commune with God. You've got all these churches out there, they spend millions of dollars on audio-visual equipment. You know, these big TV cameras and video recording and live streaming for the internet. They literally have more and more expensive gear on their stage for their sanctuary than the Beatles had when they played Shea Stadium. Literally. And I've heard so many stories from people who work at music stores and things about churches coming to them wanting the best. It's like, well, this other church has the JBL PRX series. I don't want the SRX. I want only the best. Can't afford it. We're gonna have to finance it. And these are churches. These are pastors, and all they're worried about is what their speaker system is. I mean, you might as well get a little band that said, what microphone would Jesus use? Because my recollection of the Bible is that Jesus spoke to the 5,000 without a microphone, and they heard him. Maybe it's because he had so much to say that they were quiet. And you're in an acoustic environment where you can just be heard. If the Romans can build a Colosseum where everyone in there can hear somebody speaking in the middle, why can't these mega churches be heard? You see, it's all about them. This is part of the apostasy of the church. That's how you build Christian rock stars, Christian idols. It is terrifying. It is a sign of the end times. And when you get something like Prophecy Watchers, a video TV show, you might say, now getting a worldwide audience, it's the same thing. They choose who they're going to have on their show. Well, who do they keep bringing on there? They keep bringing these people on there who are talking about giants, elongated heads, UFOs, transhumanism, DNA manipulation. That's what they keep bringing on there. They're deceiving people. And in the process, they're taking these same handful of individuals that they keep bringing on, and they're elevating them to the status of expert and guru, even though they don't know what they're talking about. I'm a homeless guy sitting in a car. I can't prove to you that I'm right about this, but think about it. Pray about it. Let us reason together. I think my explanation for what the Nephilim are makes a lot more sense and doesn't stretch credulity at all, while their explanations require you to almost take LSD for it to even make any sense. And that is, I guess, what I have for you here. Let me see. Let me make sure I didn't leave anything out that's important. Oh yes, one other thing. Well, two other things. Three other things. I'm sorry, three other things. Okay, the first thing is that, just like, remember the book of Daniel. Daniel, the book is sealed for the end of time. At that time, people will run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. In other words, no one's going to understand the book you just wrote until the end times. That's how I intended it, is what God's saying. And what do you know? Now that we're in the end times, the book of Daniel makes sense. It never made sense to a previous generation. Just like the book of Revelation really didn't make any sense to people. But now we can see how these things could happen. You could never see it in thousands of years before. You couldn't tell what was going on around the whole world in an instant. You couldn't have two witnesses be killed and have their bodies left outside the temple for 3.5 days. You couldn't have that where the whole world can see it, but now everyone can watch it on their phone. It's being unsealed in our time. Well, it's the same thing with the Nephilim, I believe. You see, it never really mattered. What did it matter to somebody in the year 402 BC whether the Nephilim meant giants or meant something else? What did it matter? The point is, from the context, you could tell that there was something wrong there, and they got out of it in their generation what they needed to get out of it. Our generation is the first generation that really truly needs to know what the Nephilim are, because we're repeating it. As in the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. As in the days of Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah, so will be the days of the coming of the Lord. At the very last generation, it's going to go back to being like those days. Our generation needs to know what the Nephilim are. Previous generations really didn't need to. It just wasn't necessary. Doesn't mean they shouldn't read it or get out of it what they can. The Holy Spirit inspires knowledge within you. But they also read the book of Daniel, and the book of Daniel says this isn't for your generation. It's for a future generation. And yet, Christians would read it anyway. And that's fine. They should. They should not ignore it. But they're not going to understand it. Our generation can. And I think we need to finally grow up as Christians and get rid of this idea of giants that humiliates us among the people we're trying to witness to, because we look insane when we talk about things like this. And we need to start just looking at what it obviously is. It's talking about people who are elevated, mighty, known, famous, big, better than you, instead of all being equal, created in the image of God. This one person just comes up and becomes better. Just like Satan from all the angels said, I will ascend to the throne. I will sit there and displace God. It's that kind of ego and pride and self-absorption, narcissism, if you will, that sends you to hell. The other thing I would say is, as always, the perpetrators of this deception that's been going on for a long time, it didn't really matter in the past, because if someone thought it was giants in the year 1200 AD, it didn't really matter, because it wasn't the end times. And the Nephilim were only relevant to Noah's time and the end times. In between, it wasn't directly relevant, so it didn't matter if you didn't understand it. So go ahead, think they're giants, who cares, whatever, it doesn't matter. But in our generation, it matters, because if you're out there looking for giants, you're being deceived. And you're wasting your time at a crucial point where we don't have time to waste. We need to know what the Nephilim were. But as always, this deception is being perpetrated by Pharisees and Sadducees. It's being perpetrated by official explanations, by churches, fake churches, apostate churches. It's by gurus and experts. These people who write books and make DVDs, and that's how they support their families, is selling this propagation of these lies. And they call themselves Christian leaders. And when they walk into a room, everyone stands up and applauds. When I walk into a room, everyone's just like, oh, great, here's a homeless person. Great. What's he going to do? Ask for money? Is that it? Want food? Is that what you're here for? Great. We were having a great time, and you had to walk in the room. Seems to me, though, the Bible says you're supposed to drop everything you're doing and go serve that homeless person. And you're supposed to ignore that celebrity who comes in there. Everything is backwards. And who's propagating it? The, quote, experts. Just like in the secular world, you've got all that junk science with these fake experts, these coronavirus experts, all these experts. Same thing is true in Christianity. They are the modern Pharisees, the modern Sadducees. And the last thing I would say, I touched on a moment ago, is that all of this is a total distraction from what we are supposed to do as Christians. One reason it's so important to understand that this is the end times and that it's urgent is because we must do our job while we're here. The job is to spread the gospel, to get souls saved so that they don't go to hell, and they come with all of us to the beauty and the magnificence of eternity in heaven with God, so that they are not lost. And while we're here, we are supposed to look after our brothers and sisters, our equals, made in the image of God. We're supposed to help the poor, the widow, the homeless, the orphan. But we're not doing that. Instead of spending $200 to help somebody who's very, very hungry or who needs help, we buy a couple tickets to a prophecy conference so we can go watch a Christian celebrity speak. And with that in mind, this homeless person living in this car has to go to work at his job to afford these luxury accommodations, since that's all I have to work with is what I earn, and it ain't much. I hope you got something really good out of this. I hope you got something important out of this. As I finish up this video, it enters my mind that this may be one of the most important videos I've made, and all praise and glory to God for that. This is to serve Him, not me. I am grateful to God that He would allow me to speak these words to you. And more than anything I've told you, I ask you to pray to God to give you wisdom and discernment to know whether what I told you is true, because I want to tell you what He wants you to know, not what I want you to know. I just don't matter, but you matter to me. And I want you to be saved and to go to heaven, not to be fallen and lost and go to hell. Please, pray on what I've said in this video and my previous videos on these related prophecy topics. And pray to God, be close to Him. Elevate Him. Not just elevate Him, He can't be elevated. He's already up there as far as it can possibly be. He's a holy God. Recognize and acknowledge His holiness. And don't elevate anyone else. Not me, not any Christian celebrity, not any secular celebrity, not a news reporter. We've got to get back to basics and what's important, folks. I got to go to work, and I'm talking too much anyway. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video helped you in your walk with God in these last, what I believe are most certainly the last days of what we've known as humanity. Thanks for watching.